Today we are going to talk about the labor theory of value, or the LTV. And while Karl Marx discusses this topic in detail in the first chapter of Das Kapital, as well as his other works, he wasn't the one who first hypothesized it. Adam Smith and Dave Ricardo also had their own versions of the labor theory of value. Smith believed that the value of goods was generally derived by the amount of labor that went into them, and Ricardo believed something similar, but also believed that the scarcity of the resources that went into the production of said good contributed to its value. There is a caveat, however, as the labor being performed has to be useful. For example, if I were to say, go out in the middle of the woods with an axe and begin swinging wildly in the middle of the air for 8 hours straight, sure, I might be getting a good workout in, but am I accomplishing useful labor? No, because in the process of swinging that axe around, I didn't produce a use value. And what is a use value? A use value is just that, a utility, something useful, a good that has useful value. So let's say I were to come back the next day to the woods with my axe, and for 8 hours straight, instead of swinging randomly in the air, I actually cut down some trees, chopped up the branches in the trunk into a batch of logs, then took the logs home to burn for firewood. Did I accomplish useful labor this time? The answer is yes, because those chopped up logs serve a useful value, that is, lighting my fireplace. While Marx does derive his own version of the LTV from Smith and Ricardo, he never actually uses the term labor theory of value. In fact, in his critique of the Gotha program, he makes the following point against the traditional LTV.
Quote, "Labor is not the source of all wealth. Nature is just as much a source of use values, and it is surely of such that material wealth consists as labor, which is itself only the manifestation of a force of nature, human labor power."
And thus, Marx's take on the LTV is better known as the law of value, which is not an all-encompassing theory of value, but a theory of the value of commodities. The law of value, in general, states that the value of an exchange value is determined by the socially necessary labor time taken to produce said exchange value. The more labor time it takes to produce the good, the more valuable that good is. Conversely, the less human labor time it takes to produce the good, the less valuable that it is. What is an exchange value? An exchange value is a good produced as a commodity with the intent of sale. An exchange value of a good is measured in relation to the exchange value of other goods, i.e., its price. Let us return to the example that I laid out earlier. Let us say that instead of taking those logs home for personal use, I instead decide to go down to the market and sell them instead. In such a circumstance, those logs are no longer a use value to me. They are now an exchange value, for I seek to transmute my logs into a use value upon the open markets. Let us say that I can chop about 10 logs per hour, and somebody on the market gives me a pound of coffee for those 10 logs. That person then goes forth, takes those 10 logs home to their personal woodwork shop, and fashions a table out of those 10 logs. Let us now say that it took them an hour to do that. It can now be said that the table is worth an equivalent of 20 logs, since it took exactly 1 hour of my labor time to chop up the 10 logs and in exactly an hour of their labor time to build a table out of those logs. The table's value can now be measured in relation to a larger set of goods on the markets. But a table's use value by itself isn't general enough to be broadly useful to everyone. What this means is that the table doesn't make a good template for the money commodity, since it is a single-use item that serves too much of a specified role. The logs that I chopped up earlier would make a better money commodity than the table, since it is more broadly useful and applicable for different things. The table is only useful for setting things on top of, while the logs can be turned into other things besides the table, be it chairs, desks, couches, burned for firewood, etc. So I ask you, viewer, out of all of the commodities on the following list, which one is best suited to be a money commodity? If your answer is the oil, then you would be correct. Oil is a relatively abundant resource that takes a great deal of human labor time to find and refine that serves as a critical use value as cheap energy-dense fuel that makes our modern transportation infrastructure possible. In other words, it is a good that is recognized as a universal equivalence by everybody in the community. In other words, it is universally valuable. In the future, we will expand upon this thought exercise and talk more about the money in exchange and the money commodity, but for now, it's time to wrap up. I have one last example to overview before we close, and this is the outline and important points in regards to the effect of technological efficiency on the magnitude of value. Let us say that instead of using an axe to chop down that tree, I use a chainsaw. Let us say this use of the chainsaw triples my productivity so that I can bring 240 logs to the market instead of 80 logs to the market. Have my logs become less valuable or more valuable? Well, the correct answer is that they are less valuable because my productivity has increased and I can now sell enough to match or even surpass the demand for logs in my community. And I have to sell them cheaper, lest they go to waste. It is in this way that the increases in the productive forces reduce the value of commodities and by extension, make the prices of goods cheaper. But once again, money and exchange are a conversation for another video. Alright everyone, that's all I have to say about this topic for today. I hope it's been informative, and I will see you guys next time. But the table's use value by itself isn't generalized enough to be broadly useful to everyone. What this means is that the table does not make a good template for a money commodity, since it is a oh my god. Shut up, dog! Please stop barking.